Hi, I'm Dave Merlino.
I'm Dustin Sweet, and this is the Know Their Story podcast. We talk to veterans about their time in service, returning home from war, and transitioning out of the military. Hopefully along the way we'll inspire you to do the same with a veteran in your life.
Because sometimes all it takes to make the world a better place is sitting down with a friend to know their story. Welcome back, season 3.
Welcome back, Dave.
3 of the Know Their Story podcast. It's been so long, I almost forgot the name of our podcast. But welcome, everyone. Welcome to Partner in Crime, Dustin Sweet, wearing a tie to make me look bad. And welcome to today's guest, Mr. Michael Schindler.
Yeah, great to be here, guys. Yeah, I know Dustin's looking so great. I'm feeling like I should probably dress up. But
it's the juxtaposition between the Vegas and the tie. If I have just the mohawk on, it doesn't work. I'm just another guy with a mohawk. But if I have the suit on, then it's okay. It kind of flies.
Yeah, got it.
Well, I'm wearing the hat, or else the light just bounces off my head. So we figured out long ago. But anyway, I just realized I was remiss. Usually I have this all set, but Mike, why don't you I know that you are a veteran coordinator, a veteran yourself.
Yeah.
But we'll just get right into it. And I don't want to steal your thunder, Dustin. Go ahead and ask your ceremonial first question.
Oh my gosh, are we going to drive right in like that? Okay. All right, Mike, how'd you decide to join the armed forces?
Yeah, so it's such a great question. For me, so my family has essentially been in the military, grew up on military installations. I actually wanted to be an actor growing up as a kid. So I was in theater and I had a scholarship to New York Performing Arts and all this stuff, back in the 80s. And I thought, man, I'm going to be somebody in the movies. And I went to the theater one day. I was 16, never forget it. And I was like every other 16-year-old boy out there. I wasn't quite sure if I was going to be like an actor or if I was going to be Perry Mason, right? If you guys remember who Perry Mason is.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to be an attorney. And so I'm sitting in this movie theater and I'm watching this movie. And as soon as the movie was done, I knew exactly what I was doing. I mean, I walked out of that theater, I called my dad, and I said, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to be Tom Cruise. I'm going to fly cool jets, and I'm going to date Kelly McGillis. And I drove, no lie, over to the recruiter's office. I walked in there. This guy is sitting there in his dress pressed whites. And I walk in, I said that exact thing to him. I'm like, you just need to know, every 16-year-old boy has that cocky attitude. And I'm like, I'm Tom Cruise. I'm going to fly your cool jets, and I'm going to date Kelly McGillis. And he's like, come and sit down. and sure enough, and I signed. And then that weekend, no lie, that weekend was down in Vancouver, Washington. That weekend, he said, hey, why don't you show up? We're playing volleyball. And if you guys remember the scene, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so amazing. And I, sure enough, played volleyball with all these other poor suckers that got, into this thing. And it was like, I'm in, I'm totally in. And then boot camp happened, and that was never in the movie, but I was just kind of carrying on a family tradition. I was like, every, my biological dad, my grandfather, my uncle, on my biological side, they all served. My stepdad, he served. He was guard, but he was a civil engineer for the Army Corps. So I grew up around it. And so for me, it just seemed like, well, this is kind of what you do. This is, sure, you serve your country. So
I saw an interview with Tom Cruise, who said he's got so many guys who come up to him. They're like, you son of a bitch, you're the reason I joined the Navy.
Well, it was the best recruiting film. Like, if you guys do your history, when you look at that, it grossed like over $300 million. It still makes money today. And it's still one of the primary reasons why people get in. And, the second movie's coming out. I was supposed to come out in 2020. Right? Yeah. And so now I'm just waiting, like, oh my God, I cannot wait, until this, like, I'd probably want to join again. I don't,
So did you end up as a fighter pilot?
I did not. So the Navy had other plans for me. I got in, and I was part of a officer training program, and I was a personnelman. So I joke. That's how I got my call sign, which was Shindog, last name Schindler. Dog, secretary. You guys can understand, what the other definition of, the other terminology for dog is. But so that was kind of my, but I was assigned to EOD, explosive ordnance. And so, I got to learn how to dive, and I got to learn deep water dive, and, a number of different cool stuff. But no, I did not fly cool jets. I didn't get to do, and I didn't date Kelly McGillis. So that didn't happen either. So, yeah.
So, but deep water dives and explosive ordnance is nothing to shake a stick at.
Yeah, I was going to say, okay, we got to talk about this for a second. Usually I like to jump right ahead to being back in the States and being a civilian, but I want to talk about underwater explosives.
Well, so again, I was just a personnel guy, right? So my job was to just document everything that either did happen or didn't happen, or never, maybe it did or maybe it didn't happen, right? Like, I can neither confirm nor deny stuff. Wink. And so I was, I was on an ammo auxiliary ship that was commissioned in 1954. So right at the tail end of the Korean War. And I think it was made with bubble gum and, barbed wire, because I swear to God, that thing, it'd get up to 23 knots and you'd feel it like you'd like shake in your bones, because we're going, full speed ahead and just like, but we carried those things that we don't talk about on board that ship. And so, we had a nuke response team on there. Certainly we did, different evolutions, things like that, different training things. I never had to take part in, seeing the guys, shut a bomb off or turn a bomb off, or I don't even remember the terminology anymore, but like, detonate, any of that. So we were pretty fortunate. And then when I transitioned off of my 2-year active duty tour, and again, the Navy's got benefits, because I was stationed out at sea. So, I wasn't assigned to a SEAL team, so I never did anything in theater. I was assigned to a shipboarding team, and I saw a lot of ocean and a lot of different ports. And there's some amazing stories that I can tell.
I like that the Navy is like, you're sort of safe. We're going to put you on this house and it's going to float around and probably nothing bad will happen. But if it does, these are sharks. They're following you.
Right. Well, and we would always joke that we're like, when you're with the rest of the fleet, when you're on a deployment, they either put you in the center of it, right, because you're protected by all the other ships, or you're trailing it, like you're out there on your own.
Well, yeah, and totally by yourself.
Yeah. So right. So we always joke that we're on a floating bomb. I mean, because of all the stuff we had on there, like we would light up the world if anything happened. So, and that would make a difference whether or not we could go into some ports or not. So you always knew that we were carrying interesting material when you could not go into port. So
why don't you just stay out there?
Why don't you hang out over there?
Yeah, exactly. Like, you got to take the skiff in. Why? Yeah.
Know why.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you have any, you read on the internet, like stories from sailors who just, unexplainable things out on the ocean in the middle of the night or anything? You see anything?
Hey, you see any cool monsters?
Yeah. No, I mean, I didn't see anything like that. It's interesting because when you're out at sea and you're doing roving patrols, so we do these roving patrols, right? So roving patrol is you're armed with a 45, in the event, essentially what you're making sure is nobody jumps off the boat, I think, more or less than somebody, coming as a fast attack. But we'd always have to be cautious if we were in the Indian Ocean or somewhere close to, some unfriendly areas. We had a crew of like 236, and it was like a big brotherhood. I mean, it was pretty amazing. We crossed the equator together, which is the whole shellback ceremony. If you've never heard those stories, I don't know how much I can legally say anymore without, people getting in trouble. But back then you could do some pretty interesting things. My claim to fame was Neptune's bride. I got voted by the ship to be Neptune's bride, which is horrible.
Sounds terrifying.
It was horrible because I had to get a size 2 mini skirt black dress, shave my legs, and stand next to Neptune, who was the most senior chief who had crossed the equator. And I at first I was like, God, I can't even believe I got voted to be Neptune's bride. This is horrible. But it was actually turned out pretty well because I got to stand next to the chief who had, fat belly, never would have passed PT test. But everybody had to suck. Every polywog, let's call them, okay, a wog, yep. Anybody that hasn't crossed the equator yet, had it on their knee, had to get down on their hands and knees and suck a cherry out of the chief's greased belly button, right? and then they had to go to me and kiss my feet. And I'm thinking, wow, this is pretty great because my lieutenant commander, is there, having to pass. And then they got to go through the hot box, which is filled with just trash and garbage and just baking in the Indian Ocean, and, get hit with fire hoses. And I mean, so Neptune's bride wasn't all that bad. I had shaved legs for about a week and, had to wear a mini skirt. And
that's a fair trade-off.
I thought it was. I didn't have to suck the cherry out of the belly hole. So it's, I'm still scarred by it.
Yeah.
So, you didn't have to do it. You just have to watch everybody else do it.
I had to watch everybody do it. I'm like, God, it's so gross. Gosh, can't even believe it. So, yeah. But it creates a brotherhood, right? Yeah. I mean, it creates something where you're just like, man, we'll do anything for you guys. We would just, it's such a great experience. And I think everybody should do it in some way, like give back to their nation. I don't care if it's teachers across borders or if it's, the Peace Corps or something, but I think every 18-year-old should have to give 2 years of time, and because it just changes your mindset, changes your mentality. It changes your outlook on life. And I don't know, you just learn. And when you're part of different cultures, I mean, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I mean, just from the exposure level, and I even have this talk, I'll be talking with my mom or talking with someone about COVID or something. And Dustin and I drove around the country during COVID and saw all these communities. And I'll tell you what, you get out of the big cities, it's a different mindset.
It really is. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And just when we drove around and just talked to people from around the country, and it is to get that exposure outside just what your neighborhood is experiencing was, I found it to be one of the better things that we've done. And amazing thing is, no matter where we were, everyone would ask, what are they thinking in the other area? Like what's being said in the other areas of the country. And it was nice, you find out it's not that different.
Yeah. It was kind of nice to kind of have that information and to be able to just talk to people and be like, nah, it's fine. People in Philly don't care, or people in Seattle care a lot and they're all really scared, or you just back and forth because everybody had so much. I think there was so much just unknown,
Yeah.
It's really nice to be able to put that.
And so
I think that perspective, when you get outside, like being in the military, you're dealing with unknowns all the time, right? You're dealing with the unknown unknowns, right? Like, so you're having to assess and make decisions pretty quickly. The Air Force has something called the OODA loop, right? Where you observe, you orient yourself, you decide and you act, right? And so when you gain a mindset of, okay, there is uncertainty no matter what I'm doing. Like I might think that, my routine is normal and this is what I do. And that's the interesting thing that I found with COVID, guys, was, for, the organization that I run, Operation Military Family, working with transitioning service members, it always was working with these guys and trying to get the rest of the world to understand what transition was like, right? Like, what do you do when every day is different? And what do you do when, the things that you're used to get upended, or you have to move every 2 years, right? That's the life of a veteran, essentially, right? Like every day is a different day. There's some routines, but, every day is kind of a different day. Now the whole world went through that. The whole world went through a major transition, right? When you think about it, like everything that was routine for everybody suddenly got flipped upside down.
Just smashed. Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
well, I can't see my family. I can't go to holidays. I can't, I can't do this. I can't do that. And I'm thinking, wow, guess what? There's like 1% of the population that's doing that every single day.
Yeah. One is like handling it better than everyone else too. Like the adversity of all the changes of COVID. Everybody I talked to who was a vet was just like, oh yeah, it's different now. Do like on their way, no big deal. Meanwhile, I'm talking to my friends who have only lived in one place their entire life, and they can't. All of a sudden, they're wildly inconvenienced, and it's the worst thing that ever happened to them. And I'm like, okay, well,
yeah.
Well, I found out that my lifestyle is apparently other people call social isolation.
Right. Well, there was some benefit. And now we joke. I'm like, oh, can I get away with I think I've been exposed to COVID to get out of family events, or, I mean, there are some funny things that come out of this, but, as we all come out of this, in 2022, 2 years later, my hope and prayer for people is that they number one, know who they are, but number two, that they understand that, life, we're here for such a finite amount of time.
Yeah.
If you believe in eternity, and I don't know what people's faith walk is, but I tend to believe in eternity. So that means the peace that I have here is like really rare. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's really unique. So that means every day is like super valuable. And so I hope that as people emerge out of this, they realize that, your family members are valuable, your friendships are valuable, the time that you spend in fellowship's valuable. Like, I do hope that people realize, I need to make every day count, because I don't know what tomorrow holds. I mean, tomorrow might be it. I might not wake up, so.
Well, one day you won't.
Well, and one day you won't. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the one guarantee, right? We know that, people are like, well, taxes. And I'm like, well, some people seem to get away with not paying those, but guaranteed that nobody's getting off this planet alive. So,
Yet.
It's
gonna
right.
be me.
It's true.
I'm the one.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. That's right, Dustin. We might, who knows? It might change in 10 years. So
Yeah, I mean, that was a huge mind shift change for me, because my dad died at 64. I had dinner with him the night before. Everything was great. He had an aortic dissection the next day, like gone before he hit the ground. Like, he was fine. And I looked around and I thought, and I was working for the government at that point, and his funeral was, packed. He left behind this legacy, this business, all these relationships. And when I went back to work at Customs, I was a GS-13, had my own office, ran my teams. And I thought, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, which could happen, I could get hit by a bus driving home tonight, everyone would say, oh, that was sad. And then my teams will get reassigned and the new supervisor will take over my office.
That's
and
right.
Life will go on. And so, I just thought, I want to go build something rather than just do something.
Yeah.
So,
I hope the rest of the world realizes that too, that, we're all here to make a difference, right? In our sphere. You've got a sphere of influence. You're going to impact that some way, somehow. If you're miserable, I tell guys now today, like, if you're miserable, stop doing it. Like, you're writing your own story. So is that what you want your story to be? This story of misery? Like, you get to the end of your life, you're like, man, I wish I could do a do-over. Just write it the way you want, because Dave, you're so right. And Dustin, this is something that we realize we do all through COVID. We did this too. We do these Tuesday gatherings called the Holy Smokes gathering. It's a bunch of guys that get together and they smoke cigars and drink wine and bourbon and scotch and whatever they want to drink. I know, right? And so big fire pit. And, there were some guys there that, they certainly got COVID and they got a few other things. And there was one guy there that was a former Navy guy. He was older, Vietnam era, and probably smoked too many cigars, and he was a little overweight, and anyway, he got COVID and he didn't make it. He passed on, and they had a memorial for him. It was great. And every Tuesday I go back and I sometimes think about him, because I'm like, he's not here. But to your point, Dave, life goes on, right?
Yeah.
So that's why if we realize if there's anything that we can do to honor those 900,000 people that died for however they died, right? But if we can honor those people by doing our part, that's what I think people need to do as a wake up out of this, is go, okay, so what's my part in this world? You know?
Yeah. Where do I fit and how do I make it better?
How do I make it better? Yeah. You know?
Well, and that's what, doing this movie and doing this podcast has taught us too. I actually have a line in the movie of, people, make the world a better place or leave the world a better place than you found it. And I think too many people think that means I've got to cure cancer or I've got to do this big thing to change the world. Like, no, the line is not change the world. It's just make the world a better place. And maybe that's just seeing someone and saying, I really love your shirt today. And it makes them happier. Or, for us, we sat down and, we always say we talked to veterans, but we didn't, we listened to them, and we've tracked it over the years. And just that small thing of someone hearing their story, it has improved their outlook, which technically leaves the world a better place than we found it.
I think that's so powerful. I mean, the story that you guys have created through that film, number one, welcoming these guys home, right? Because Vietnam was that era that, they didn't want anybody to know that they were coming home. They wanted to come home, but they wanted to be home, but they didn't want to let anybody know what they'd done for the last 4 years or however many tours. Like my biological dad did 2.5 tours in Vietnam, right? So, that there was a period of time that was just a scar on America. And to your point, to be able to listen to people. And I think it's, we have this saying here where we say, how you change the world is one person at a time, right? That's really how you change the world, is one person at a time. And to your point, Dave, that could be just sharing your smile with somebody, or even more importantly, listening to them, right? Quick to listen, slow to speak, right? I mean, and that's what you guys have done with this film. You gave these guys an opportunity to just kind of share their story and get it out. And I'm sure there was such a healing process for that. And that, I think that's so important as storytellers, to be able to give people somebody to relate to, but it's always therapeutic for those who are in the film, right? Yeah. When we did our film, here we were in the middle of COVID, and, we had all these amazing speakers that were like, they had nothing to do. And they said, well, yeah, we'll give back, right? Because they want to share, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah.
So
all
give
right,
people an opportunity.
Hold on. We're jumping ahead. Because I really want to talk about your film.
Well, I don't want to talk about that yet. I want to keep talking about your guys' film. I mean, I love the fact that you're giving them just this huge opportunity,
it's cool, man. It's been really cool to talk to those guys and just like, in terms of like being good documentarians, I don't think we passed the test, because we made friends with all those guys and now we're having barbecues with them, and like they became our friends. So that's not really great documentarian.
Hold on. Supersize Me. Who was in that? Sure. There's never been a Michael Moore movie he hasn't wanted to put himself in, so I don't really think we're breaking the wheel here.
No, I'm just saying. They're such good guys, and it's so easy to hang out with them, and like, you would want every one of those dudes to live next door to you. They're all such good people, and the cross section of America that they create is so amazing. The part where they're all from different parts of the country and they all went back to different parts of the country. Like whenever we see them at a reunion, who's the guy who came out? It had been his first. We thought that they had seen each other like 6 months ago, and they hadn't seen each other for like
Danny and Paul.
Yeah, and they just like they just fell in thick as thieves with their regular crowd, and it didn't seem like any kind of thing. And if you told me, when they told me they hadn't seen each other, however long, 30 years or whatever, I was just like flabbergasted.
Yeah.
Because no time had passed at all for those boys. And
yeah.
They were all, back to it.
Well, the one that got me was Paul McCord, who's been a guest on this podcast. He was going through Facebook, and someone had been tagged in one of our pictures. We put up a throwback Thursday of Apache Troop, and he looked at it and said, "Hey, that's me in that photo." And then he saw that Doc Del Valle had been tagged in it, and so he reached out to Doc, and found him on Facebook. And then Doc said, "Hey, we're having a reunion in DC." And then Paul ended up going to the reunion and being the first time that they'd seen him there. Talk about making the world a better place. Because I needed a post on a throwback Thursday, and I was like, "Hey, this one seems like good quality when you're dealing with Polaroids from 50 years ago." And I just happened to put it up that day.
And
so cool.
It is good quality, man. That's exactly.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So I do have a question. Dustin says we're getting ahead. I do want to circle back to one thing, because it does tie into, in terms of coming home.
Yeah.
You're out on the boat, ship, vessel. I don't want to use, I know everyone's got their preferred term. I don't want them to yell at me. And with that cargo that you're carrying, that if you're told that it needs to fly somewhere, it's, we're talking about massive destruction. Did you ever just sit there and look at it and think, holy crap, like, look at this responsibility? You were probably 20, sitting here with these weapons and knowing what they could do. I mean, I don't know if, like, when you were on out in the middle of the ocean, or when you came home, like, what is that process like for you?
Never thought about it before. He's just crushing his mind right now. It's just
no, it's weird, because you get there and you're just like, well, this is my job, right? But when you think about it, when you look back, and actually when I've toured different ships and even submarines, and I see who's running those things, like the chiefs are 27 years old, and I'm like, my gosh, which we all thought was old back then, right? Because we're all like, the captain's 40, and barely, the captain's barely gone through puberty at that point. So, when you look at the rest of the world and you think about who's running our military and the responsibility that are placed on the shoulders of young men and women today, I guess I never thought about it. I just always went, no, this is my job. Like, if they say I need to do it, then, this is what I do. I'm doing it because my purpose was clear. The military was really good about that, Dave and Dustin, which, my purpose was to help save the world from bad people. So I knew that anything that I did, if I was commanded to do it, that it was for one purpose, to help save the world from bad people. That was it. So it was really easy to go ahead and answer the call, right? The missions were easy because it was like, well, this is what we do in order to help save the world from bad people, right? My identity was really clear because that was the uniform I wore and, the insignias that I had, so that was really easy. When I transitioned out, it was really kind of hard because the rest of the world hadn't caught up. Right. Like, I was saying,
your MO had changed, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I was like, now a civilian, essentially. Right. Still on Navy orders, but now I'm a civilian, and civilians don't know what the heck they're doing. They're like, I'm 50 and still trying to figure out my life. Right. And here I am 20 and I'm like, man, I've already seen a lot, done a lot, been around, had a lot of responsibility. And now I'm with a bunch of college kids who their big deal is like, hey, can't wait till we do, the big, party with the beer and booze in the bathtub. And, it's going to be amazing. Right. And I'm thinking, well, okay. So transition for me was hard because I was so used to that brotherhood. And I tell people, I mean, I jumped after college, I jumped through 14 jobs.
Wow.
Looking for that fellowship.
Well, did you have that thought of, I used to work with nuclear material, and now, we're worried about, I don't selling another car, whatever,
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, the things that were, I guess it changes your perspective. I think what you're getting at, Dave and Dustin, is the things that seemed really important before were, before I joined the service, were certainly less important after when I got out, right? Because I would always think, well, nobody's shooting at me, and really, is that really that important? Like, it's not going to matter like next week. So is it really, like, why are we getting all spun up on this? And I would say that that's pretty much how I've been able to manage, although, if somebody slights my daughter or her soccer team, I tend to be that dad that wants to go ape crazy, but
we don't know anything about that.
right.
No.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
my wife liked to do the scorebook at the basketball games, because then she would be at the score table next to me, and every once in a while just be like, calm down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, your perspective changes. I, that's why I jumped through 14 jobs.
Right.
It was because I was like, really? This is what people do? This? Like forever? You do this forever? Like, well, yeah, no, this is, you could be like me 20 years from now. I'm like, oh gosh, I don't want to do that. So
I'm gonna have to go right now.
Yeah, right now. And I did. I'd be like 3 months, and I'm like, I was like speed dating through jobs. I mean,
that's great.
I was like, oh, that one doesn't work. Oh, that doesn't work. Oh, I mean, I got my Series 6 and 63 license because I thought, man, I just want to, I want to be the next Gordon Gekko. And like, I needed to stop watching movies because it was, Top Gun that got me in, and now it was Wall Street that was getting me into the financial sector. And, and oh gosh, and that lasted 6 months. That was like one of my longest jobs. And then I became a project manager, and that lasted 7 years. But I didn't have an office to go to. I was like,
here's the question about that, because project management has that same team building piece to it. Is that where you started putting together that team building was really where you really wanted to go with your life?
Yeah, I realized that, what I want to do is really construct teams. I want to manage projects. I want things to be different every day. I don't want to just be the guy that has to show up and file things in a file cabinet.
Yeah.
I want to make a difference. And I mean, I love what I do now, because now I just work with transition service members, right? I get them back on mission, purpose, identity. When they get out of the service, we help them narrow, what they want to do in their life, like recreate your story. What do you want your story to be? Let's help you get there. It's different for every person, right? It's not like cookie cutter, like, okay, well, Dustin and Dave, it's the same blueprint for both of you. It's not that at all, right? So I love it from that regard. And I get to do cool other stuff, work with, people that are amazing. I mean, it's, if I die tomorrow, I'm not disappointed.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that right there is such a big driver for me. I think I figured that out before I met Dave, even back when I was 17. I really, really was trying to have my own experience, and really, I think the reason Dave and I made friends so fast is because he's on that same track of just being like you only get one shot at this, so just like, what's it going to be? Whatever it's going to be is what you decide. So jump in and start swimming. And yeah, I don't know, man. Some people really struggle with it, and some people it's so easy for them. And I always feel bad for the guys I see struggling with it. I wish I could help them make that transition a little bit easier to being more proactive and really having that feeling of like, I don't know. It's almost like I can hear the game clock ticking down, Yeah. Like, yeah. I don't know when the final buzzard's going to be, but like I'm 43. So there's like, there's 43 other years over here. And then it's just like, okay, buddy, it's just clocking down.
Well, and like I said, my dad died at 64.
Yeah.
My grandpa died at 100. Now I won't know what genes I got till my 65th birthday.
Right. Well, it isn't it. I mean, it's so like my biological dad died at 71. My grandfather on that side died at 74. My shipmate, who we served together on board ship, and then we were college roommates, and we met our wives together and everything else. Went to each other's wedding. He was in my wedding. I was in his wedding. And it was just, we were friends. He became a detective. He opened up an Irish sports bar as well, because that's what every cop does. And but he had a heart attack like at 48. And I remember at 48 being in the gym. It was a couple years ago, 5 years ago. And thinking, do people live past 48? Like that was my thing. Like I was like I was at the gym, like scanning the gym, like, okay, there's people older here, right? Like I suddenly had that like panic moment, like, oh my God, is that like the time? Like, do we have this? And oh gosh, I mean, but to get people to just own their part of their life, Dustin, you're so spot on. I mean, Dave, I remember when we first sat at the coffee shop, right? We were with Jack and we're sitting at the coffee shop talking about this film that you're going to do. And I thought, man, who would ever want to be a filmmaker? Like that just seems like such a horse racket. Like you got to be crazy, right?
We are.
And then, I fell into the trap, right? Like, Chris Nolan calls me out and says, hey, you want to make a film? I'm like, sure, why not? And then I'm like, oh my God, why do people do this? Like, this is crazy. But when you're done with it, like you guys are, and seeing this thing, it's like giving, I don't want to say it's like giving birth, because my wife could be like, you have no idea. It's like birth, right?
No, it's making something and putting it out in the world and letting other people have a look at it. It's
and then not checking the internet comments.
Yeah,
well,
don't do that.
And also we've been pretty fortunate there. Again, we haven't gone wide release. We've just gotten a lot of great comments back and feedback, but at some point I just don't care. Like so what? Like we shot this during we shot it during COVID. So there's some parts in there where you're like, the sound sounds a little off. Well, you have no idea what we had to do to get it to sound like that. So, like you can say whatever you want, but I put it out there and you sat home and ate Doritos. So,
I think that's the great part about projects is like, okay, I finished that thing, that's done. Now it's a thing. And anybody can say whatever they want about it, but I did that thing. So I don't really like if you don't like it, that's cool. Which one did you make?
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah. I mean, I had that talk with my daughters. They didn't have an 8th grade track season, but they did kind of they did some virtual stuff. And then they had for the 8th graders, just like a citywide track meet, like one last hurrah. There's one girl on her team, never run track, not an athlete, like at all, but just decided I want to do this. And she was losing, by like half a track length, out there, like walking at the end. And some people in the crowd were like, rah. And so I was telling the girls, I'm like, last time I checked, that girl was out doing it. Yeah. And everyone making fun of her was sitting there drinking a pop. Like I will never make fun of anyone actually doing.
Yeah.
It's so true. And hopefully, I mean, this, the past 2 years has been very revealing, right? I think it's revealed a lot of people's, character. I was so busy that I didn't get too involved in, the political upheavals of everything, because as you guys know, as filmmakers, there's other more important things that you're working on, not the fall of the country or anything, but not that I think we're not close to there, but maybe, but
it'll be fine. Did you get the data?
Yeah, we'll be fine. There's nothing to see here. Just look over in Ukraine right now. But I have such a high respect. The unfortunate part of being part of that whole process, like the writing and the filming and the sound and the editing and the special effects and everything, like I had to remind myself the kids go to college for this stuff. Like they want to do this.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here like through half the project going, oh my God, just beating my head, like, 4 or 5 times a day, getting calls from, Chris Nolan going, hey, we got to do this and we got to do this. And then you got to do this. And then you got to, and I'm like, dude, I could barely turn on my computer, So, and thinking, wow, I have such high respect. Like those people should make millions of dollars. Like,
yeah,
because you're not only getting a story out there, but you're making people feel good and you're making impact and everything. Every scene, you guys know it, every scene that you cut, right?
Every second
is like, it's just, it's crazy. Like I had.
When you think about like the Avengers movies, those are $250 million corporations to put together with thousands of employees filming on different, Game of Thrones filmed in 3 different countries in 2 different continents.
Yeah. And then people are like, well, that documentary wasn't like a Marvel. And you're like, well, let me tell you why. So, you're like, I know you expect there to be, unicorns and pink rainbows flying through this thing too. But, I think as storytellers, it's going to relate to a certain audience, right? And I think that the beautiful thing that you guys are doing with your story is you're telling the story certainly the Apaches, which are amazing. I mean, I've got a friend that flew Apaches and did 4 combat tours in a recent OEF, OIF vet. And, but that era of Vietnam, which is so misunderstood. And when you look at the Vietnam era vets and when they come back and you see that the majority of them were highly successful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, more successful as a group.
Those tropes that we grew up with are totally trash. They're not cool at all. The Vietnam vets are. We found some listing a couple years ago that was like, here's how successful they are as a group, and here's, you know, their rate of suicide is lower than everybody else, and it just like went through and trashed every trope we had. Yeah, they're a remarkable group of women who served and came home and you know, put America through the 80s. Just like, how about some tech explosion and growth? How about some of this? How about telecom everywhere? It's wild. Yeah, like to think about how much they struggled with the radios and how much they struggled with just communication back and forth, and to see them come back to the States and make telecom such a big priority and really push communications technology as far as humanity goes is really interesting.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty incredible. I mean, I think the human spirit's incredible to begin with. I mean, sure. I just think that we've been sopped as a nation for so long. That, you know, I don't know if you guys ever saw that show, Hell on Wheels. I don't know if I'm supposed to promote other shows on your podcast, but sure. Hell on Wheels is amazing.
Yeah.
But it's all about, you know, the railroad and building the railroad from the east to the west, right? And that whole competition and, you know, this whole land grab thing. And the thing that I got out of that whole series was the fact that here we built it with, you know, we didn't have strong Indian relationships, right? I mean, there was people getting attacked. We had smallpox. We had disease. We had, you know, I mean, I think the average age somebody lived to was like 42 or something. I don't know. I mean, it was right. I mean, and yet we built the nation on that. And we didn't stop the world because there was smallpox. I mean, we just kept going. Like, if you got it, well, it was your time to go. And so I kind of look at it now where I'm like, you know, I sailed the world on a floating bomb. And you guys want me to be worried about a pandemic? Okay. I mean, I can't hide from the air. I mean, it's a virus. Like, you know, and I'm not meaning to be political or downplaying anything that happened with that by any stretch. I'm just saying that there's things in life that are going to happen to people that we have no control over.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so what we have to get really good at is controlling the controllables, the things that we can control. What can we control? Right. And how do we continue to press forward and move on in life and make impact in a positive way, not a negative way? Right. So, I mean,
that's the talk. I have 2 14-year-old daughters, freshman in high school, like that magic age of insecurity and, you know, meeting new people. And, you know, it's just that talk of like, can you fix this problem? No. All right. Then you need to acknowledge you can't fix it. Like, can you control this? Can you not control it? If you can control it, work towards controlling it. But there's some things you just kind of gotta, stop wasting, stop giving your energy to something you can't change. Like, go with the flow.
So true. It's so true. It's so true. Yeah. Yeah. I'm impressed with what you guys are doing, though. I love that you're telling other people's stories. I love that you're giving people hope out there. I hope that other people can learn from us. You know, we are a bunch of guys just sharing information,
and that wasn't even the story we thought we were telling.
No, not at all.
Started the movie. We thought we were just gonna 2 guys born after the war trying to figure out how these veterans were so crapped on compared to every other war. And so that's what we started out asking, is just learning. But after the cameras turned off and seeing that change in them, we're like, this is the real story.
It's the real story right there. It's such an interesting, humans are amazing.
Yeah.
It's cool to document their the way they think about things.
Yeah. We kind of had the same. We were working on this film called The War Within, which was really to really understand both the internal and external effects that war has on veterans, right? Like, what are the internal challenges that we face, and what are the external perceptions that we face as well, right? The war within. And then when COVID hit, it was Chris that called up and said, we got to do it on VUCA. And I couldn't remember what the heck VUCA stand for. I'm like, what is that? So, and it's an Army War College training: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. And he's like, the whole world's living in VUCA right now, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, so true. Like, how many people, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, like that's everybody. Like, everybody's in a VUCA world. But the cool part was you'd flip that script and you got vision, understanding, clarity, and adaptability. So how you combat VUCA is with VUCA, right? So it was like perfect. I was like, oh my God, that's a brilliant story. And I think as filmmakers, we learned that there actually had to be this futurist idea behind the film too.
Yeah. Because
we could tell, like, okay, but yeah, where are we going? Like, how does empathy play into this, right? And you learn that as you sit and listen to the people that you're interviewing, and you suddenly go, you have that aha moment, like you guys realize, oh yeah, we're kind of telling this story, but no, we're really telling this other story. And that's the power of filmmaking. Yeah. And that's what I love, what you guys are bringing to the table. I mean, I've been fortunate to see some of the inside track stuff, and I think I have a book back here on it too. So
yeah,
it's really cool.
It's
well,
really
and go ahead, Dustin.
I love Zoom interviews because you never know. They're like, shut up. No, it's my turn.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I love the extended. No, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah.
When we talk about, with VUCA and how we can change that and change your minds, your outlook. And a lot of it is how we can help the veterans. But again, we are trying to bridge to, and that's why Michael Barrett told us that we needed to put ourselves in the movie to be that entrance, because it's really easy as a non-veteran to see two veterans talking and thinking, okay, well, I don't understand that world. I shouldn't get involved in that world because I don't speak that language. Yeah. And for us being non-veterans, just going in and being like, hey, would love to hear your story. That's something people can relate to. But for you as a veteran coordinator, from having worked on the film, what kind of advice would you give? I'm actually going to two-part it. A, to veterans who may be thinking, I want to do more, or like, what can I do? Advice for them. Maybe they're just transitioning out of the military or been out a couple of years, but also to their friends or family members, like, how can we start bridging this gap and talking about this? Yeah, well, I think it's so important that there is that bridge, right? I think, the difference between veterans and non-veterans is essentially, the difference between one person saying, I'm going to go ahead and, serve my country, and somebody else saying, no, I took a different path, right? So different experience, still human. That's what, right? We have to remember that. I think that's the big piece. The fact that you're telling the story through the lens of non-veterans is extremely smart, because then the audience can see through your eyes, right? Which is so important. That's kind of what we did through our film. Is I didn't act like I was the expert of VUCA. I took the audience on a journey through the lens of my family on discovering what is VUCA, right? So it's a different approach, right? Like, so every family in America can relate to that, right? It wasn't like, hey, I'm an expert on this and you need to listen to me. It was like, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And I was combating all this volatility and stuff too. And I think as transitioning veterans and civilians, I think how you bridge that gap is by creating co-vision. So it's so important, whether you're a veteran transitioning or a civilian member transitioning, is knowing who you are. Simon Sinek talks about the why, and I'm always like, well, yeah, but you got to kind of start with a who, as I believe. And, you start with a who and then the why. It's so important. Not discounting that by any stretch, but, who do you want to be? And so then as civilians and veterans, if we're a family, we can say, well, what does it mean to be us? Like, who are we? Like, what does it mean to be a Merlino? What does it mean to be a Sweet? Like, my daughters know what it means to have a family mission statement. Like, if you say, what does it mean to be a Schindler? They'd be able to rattle off exactly what our mission statement is, right? I only did that because
of my training experience, but I work with every family on that same thing, whether they're a veteran or non-veteran. Is what's your family mission statement?
Cool.
That's how you bridge that gap. Is you get out, and yes, we have different experiences, but who are we together? Because you guys have seen things through a different lens than I've seen things. And I'm like, well, what do we want to accomplish together? Who do we want to be together? Well, this is what we want to be. We're great. So it goes back for me, like biblical terms. It's like the hand, the hand can't say to the foot, I'm more important, right? They have different purposes.
Yeah.
But every part of this body makes up the body. And that's where we have to get to, I believe, as a country, is realizing that regardless of our political beliefs or religious beliefs, etc., is we got to be one team, one fight. Mm-hmm. And that when I say one team, one fight, that isn't just, hey, veterans, it's just all about us. It's like one team, one fight. Where are we going? What do we want to do together? Yeah. And if we can get on co-vision together, golly, we're so unstoppable.
It's crazy. Every time the United States decides to do something and is like behind it, it's crazy how fast it happens.
Yeah.
The whole world jumps along. We just go, duk, 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 duk.
Yeah.
We're going to connect the internet into everyone in the world with these cables. What? Okay.
Yeah.
10 years later, we're all talking to each other on Zoom. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Right. I mean, we got to get back there. That's I know, David, might not have been the perfect answer. Like I could say, well, everybody's got to go through a program. I don't believe that. I believe that just people need to sit down and really figure out, what does my best year look like?
Cool.
Yeah. No, that's, and that's, everyone gives a different answer. And that's what we want people to see too. There's not one set way to do this. I mean, It'd be easy if it's like, hey, do these 3 things and everyone's a billionaire. Like, and that's what I tell my kids too. Like, if it was an easy to become a billionaire, everyone would be one.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's not one set thing for every single person. Dustin and I, for as long as we've known each other and for as close of friends we are, we're not the same person.
Yeah.
And that's too, I think, can see it. Like we were in Sedona for the Sedona Film Festival with one of our short films.
Oh, I know what you guys were doing in Sedona. Yeah, we know about Sedona.
Yeah, it was an amazing festival. Unfortunately, it was the first festival we ever went to, so we thought every festival put you up in hotels and gave you,
we're just like, oh man, this is gonna be great.
And then the next festival was like in the drama room of a high school with 7 other people, and we're like, something seems different.
Yeah.
But we were there, and you get up for the question and answer period, and so one guy was like, wait a second, you used to be a federal law enforcement officer and you're wearing an anarchy belt buckle and you're telling me you're friends. I'm like, yeah, because we're humans. Like,
yeah,
we're adults.
Yeah. That's the power though, right? I mean, that's what I loved about the military, is what, like, we could give each other a hard time. Like, I mean, there's things like I could tell stories, but I can't have it documented. But there's things that we, that we did that, I look back at that, I'm like, oh my gosh, how do we ever get away with that stuff? And and giving each other a hard time, like stuff like, I mean, people get crucified today, and yet we were friends.
Yeah.
Right. But it was like we were taking things to the edge.
People think Dustin and I hate each other with our banter, and we're like, no, we've been in each other's wedding.
Some of the best moments I've had with Dave in the last 10 years are other people being like, God, you guys are so rude to each other. How are you partners? And we're just like, oh, actually, that idea just sucks, and I'm used to shitty ideas coming out of his mouth.
Yeah.
But since we're not afraid to say that's really dumb,
that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
We don't spend 2 months on a dumb idea.
But,
I mean, I'll have screenwriters, we'll be at a conference, something, and they're like, oh, you used to be a cop, will you read my screenplay? And in my mind, I'm like, I don't want to read your screenplay. Because if you haven't, like, it falls into a couple things. Like, you actually have some experience, or you're writing it based off what you've seen other people write on. And so sometimes I'll tell them, like, okay, I'm going to tell you a story, and if you laugh at this story, you can probably, because dark humor, like, if you don't understand dark humor, don't write a military story, don't write a cop story. Like, just don't. And so I'm gonna, I'll go into my mind and, like, think of like 7 or 8 different stories that I think are jokes that other people would be horrified by. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to tell you the story of this real thing that happened. And if you laugh at it, you can write your movie. If you're horrified by it, let's go ahead and find another idea.
Yeah, it's true, right? You just know what the makeup is. Yeah, you just know what the makeup is. I think it just comes down to listening, though. I mean, if I think too many people are out there trying to become somebody that they want, that they see somebody and they go, I want to be that guy, instead of going, who am I?
Yeah.
You know,
I see a lot of that with the Robert Downey Jr. transition. Everybody like wants to be Robert Downey Jr. in Avengers, but nobody wants to be Robert Downey Jr. 10 years prior when he's, destitute on the street and totally addicted to drugs. There's steps to get there, man. And like,
yeah.
And realistically, every one of us, I think we're living through a weird thing where, there's 3 times as many people on the planet as when we were born. Right. So there's like extra dudes now. And so it makes us feel kind of, not as special, because even if you're 1 in a million, there's 100,000 of you walking around, which in my mind I'm like, oh, I should collect them all together. 100,000 of me is a very intense army. The part is like, we're all so unique and we're all so individual, and that's really what your experience sets you apart from everyone else in the world. And nobody's ever going to have that experience again, even if you were having the exact same experience as your twin who's standing just to the left of you. You're going to have the right eye view, and I find that once people really get okay with that, they start answering the who question. And you were right, the who leads to the why. And once you have a real good relationship with who you are, and then why you are starts to arrive, people get really, really real, really, really fast.
Yeah.
I have identical twin daughters who share the same top level DNA, and they are not the same person.
Yeah. It's so true, right? I mean, people are always concerned, like, well, I've got a competitor. And I'm like, yeah, maybe, but probably not, because you will never relate to somebody the same way. Like, there's a million different, veteran transition programs. And I tell guys, listen, you can go to any one. There's a lot of things that we do the same as other people. There's a lot of things that we do differently, but you don't get me. And I don't say that as being egotistical or cocky or, anything. I'm just like, I'm the difference maker. Like, if we get along and it's good for you, then, it's going to be amazing. If I'm not the right fit, then that's okay. I'm okay with it. And I think, that's the thing that we have to realize as individuals, is we bring something very unique to the table. And we have to embrace those down moments. I loved what you said, Dustin. Like, people don't want the Robert Downey Jr., 10, 15 years ago, right? When he was, dragging his wagon across the, just trying to figure out where he was going to get his next hit. People don't want to be that guy, but it was that experience that shaped who he is today, right? It was those, as Carrie and I call it, our lucky moments. Like, we've had so many people say, oh, you guys are so lucky. And we're like, you didn't see the time we were cleaning toilets. Like, was that a lucky moment too? Like, you didn't see us when we were walking around the store with our calculators trying to figure out how we were going to pay for groceries. Was that a lucky moment? Like, now suddenly we're lucky, because why? Well, I'll tell you why, because all that led up to here.
Yeah.
And we didn't stop. Right. And that's the key, is you just don't stop. Don't stop. Just keep moving until God plucks you off the planet. And, you wake up and you're like, wow, this is a pretty amazing castle. I don't have to wash his gross body anymore. So, I mean.
Well, and everyone is lucky. Not everyone recognizes the luck when it happens. And the same thing happened to me. I mean, the reason that we're here, I'll tell you the reason that we're here making a movie is because I tore up my shoulder in customs 15 years ago. What had happened is I tore it up in training and was kind of going along. And then so finally my doctor, I have a slap lesion, can't be repaired surgically. It was defensive tactics. I picked a guy up and pushed him back down, and my shoulder just went boop. And I continued on. Finally, my doctor said, look, you can do the required stuff, but if it's, someone in DC's like, I think it would be great if we had them wrestle with their batons, it's like stuff like that is like, no, like if you screw up your shoulder again, it's done.
Yeah.
And so went to the range. I'm like, I can do the required stuff, but like this whole, people sitting at a desk thinking we can do these awesome things. No. And so they kicked me off the range. And they're like, well, I want to deal with you. And I was like, all right, then I'm out of here. And it was, they're like, well, you either do this or we're going to take your gun. And I was like, here you go. Like, I'm out. And they were so shocked that I called their bluff. I'm like, really? Because my dad died 3 months ago and I've been pondering life anyway, and you're going to pull this?
Yeah.
Like, I'm out. And so then a week after I left, we found this thing for a directing school down in LA, like a 2-day intensive. Went down, met that Darren Scott, who's one of the driving forces of this movie, because we're at the bar with him when we were offered this, and he was stirring his drink, and he's like, well, we were asking, like, should we do this? We've never done a doc. And he was stirring his drink, and he just looked at us like, well, I've got one question for you, and you can answer this, and we'll tell you if you should do the movie. He's like, are you stupid? Like, I don't think so, but, and he's like, because you're stupid if you don't do this. Wow. And so all of that happened because I tore up my shoulder in customs. And I'll tell you what, I did not go home that night and look at the ceiling and think, I am so lucky. This is the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah. And that's something though, but you carried it on. I mean, you're one of those guys that actually went to school for it. And I'm one of the guys that got sucked into it. Right. I mean, you purposely asked for the punishment, Dave. So I have no sympathy for you when it comes to filmmaking at all. Like, I got dragged into it. I didn't go, hey, I'm going to go to school for this because I think it'd be really
don't blame him. I drug him along with me. I was like, no, it's great. You're going to love this. Because the whole time he was, he was doing.
Oh, so you're Dave's.
I was doing animation, and I was like, don't worry. This is
that right?
Thing.
That is so funny. Well, that was Chris. Chris is like, no, this is going to be great. You're going to be in a film. And I'm like, well, I don't know that I necessarily want to be in a film. And then he just wouldn't stop.
Like, okay.
All right. I'm going to keep going. I mean, just call this guy and call this guy and call this guy. And then before you know it, you're like, oh my God, there's so many amazing people in here. How do we get all these amazing people? And then you start to create the story, and you see the impact it has on people, right? As a storyteller. And you're like, oh my gosh, we could move people to a new place. Like, can we inspire people to be like, Dave, it's never easy. I can't even imagine, like, Dustin, you're, being in that field, that's crazy. I think you're just crazy. But I mean, you got the haircut that goes along with it. But for Dave to go from a federal job that has like a paycheck,
sure,
and then, like in a pension and healthcare, and to go, yeah, I'm going to make a documentary. I mean, I knew I wasn't set out for corporate. Like, I knew that 15 years ago, right? Like, when I left corporate America, and I just knew that I was a project management guy. I just knew that's the way it was going to be. So I wasn't really, but I remember that first day of walking out without not having a paycheck. Right. I mean, I remember that.
Yeah.
Thinking,
yeah, it's a real thing, man. Everything gets a little tighter. You start walking with your hips forward a little more because the back end's all clenched up.
Yeah.
Yeah. You start thinking about all the things that are coming due 60 days out.
Well, and Michael Barrett thinks that, the way the movie's coming along, that it can compete for awards, and a, good chance to be on the platforms, and people are going to look at it and be like, wow, this is their first feature film, because we were screenwriters before this, and we've done short films. They're like, oh, their first feature film, and look how great it's doing. I'm like, yeah, but you didn't see me sitting up at midnight watching YouTube videos on how do I use Premiere Pro.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that something that, that's even more impressive to me, Dave, that you guys did that, because the advantage I had is I had Chris Nolan, right? So he knew all that stuff. Like, I didn't, like Premiere Pro, I didn't even know that was a program. Like, and then he's showing me how you do it all, and you put it all, and I'm like, this is how you make film? And he's like, oh yeah, no, that's how you make film.
Yeah, this is totally how it goes.
This is the exciting stuff, is you're dragging your cursor trying to find where to cut, and you hear the dialogue. Woo, 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 woo,
yeah.
Woo, woo. My wife's like, can you put on the headphones? Because it's just back and forth.
Oh my gosh. Well, and then, so we got signed by Gravitas, and then, you know, when it goes through Apple, like it's coming out on Apple, but Apple has their whole procedure that you go through. So they're like, it's a little hot in this area. We need new stems. And I didn't know what stems were. Like, I didn't know what any of this stuff meant. Like, you know,
we're just starting to bite off the deliverables sandwich. And they're like, here's the things you're going to need. And we're like, okay, I'm going to need to fly up to Spokane and we're going to have to sit down and sort this out.
Yeah. See, and I think you guys, I mean, Chris and I did it all via Zoom.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, cause he's in Santa Monica and I'm here in, you know, Seattle area and then COVID. Yeah. And they were kind of really concerned and I didn't want to go into communist California. So, you know, you can edit that part out, but it, you know,
everyone knows. Everyone knows.
Yeah. So what an amazing experience. I mean, to think that you guys came together, did this, and that you're actually doing it. Like you're doing, like I just had to figure out how to make cameras work and, you know, write script and, you know, and I've written a couple books. So, you know, script writing wasn't too difficult for me.
Oh man, isn't it a fun switch into script mode? I love that. Like
you can't see it, you can't say it.
You can't,
yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's true. I mean, there was things that, like, you know, we rented the Moore Theater. We had that for a day, and we shot there.
Where'd you shoot? I worked there for like one of my first jobs.
Well, we shot on the main stage.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, so you'll see scenes there that are actually in the film.
Cool.
And you see us pan the theater. Oh gosh, you guys hear the dog in the background. You see that stuff, but so we'd have the script, and then Chris in the middle, because he's directing via remote, he's saying, no, I want to cut that. Let's do it this way. And I'm like, what? Like I just spent like last night, like memorizing that script. And, you know, we only have the Moore for like a couple hours. So, you know, and then, oh no, we're just going to change this whole scene. I'm like, oh my God, you know, and then I can't get the teleprompter. Like there's parts of the movie that as you go through it, you're like, there are so many, like people are like, did you have a teleprompter? I'm like, oh, kinda, but it would stop working like halfway through. And I'd just have to keep winging it because I knew that we were on a time, you know, and I'm like, oh my God, let me just, you know. That is the stuff that I think people have to realize in life, that what they see in the movie isn't always what they see.
Right.
Right.
Or what anybody had planned.
You know? Right. Or what anybody planned. And if you take that same philosophy and apply it in your life, like we always try to script our life, like, well, this is ideally what we want it to happen. Right. And we say, write your story, but understand that other people are writing on the pages of your story.
Right.
You just have to adapt. You have to be adaptable. So,
I mean, I again, from a movie line, but I say it to my girls all the time: improvise, overcome, adapt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you to Heartbreak Ridge for that one.
It's a classic, which I unfortunately I think is probably lost on a generation or two. I don't. Yeah, my daughter's like, when did this movie come out? I'm like, 1985. Oh my God, it's so old, you know?
Yeah, we're getting there. We're at that place where the things that we think are like totally normal are like the classic television channel, like Turner Classic Movies is starting to have things that I think were like yesterday.
Right.
The quote unquote classic rock stations with Pearl Jam on them and Nirvana.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Like
my daughters will say like,
yeah,
my daughters will be like, oh, that old movie. And I'll tell them like, you need to pick your next words very carefully.
Right.
It made me think to myself, oh man, what kind of sick cane am I going to get? I got to start shopping for canes. Like I want to have a cool hat and a good cane.
Go with your Anarchy belt buckle, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's so great.
I need a new one.
Well, for our audience, we've talked about your movies coming out March 1st. Where can they find it?
They'll be able to find it on like Amazon Prime, Dish Network, Comcast, YouTube. Gosh, it's also going to be on. What's the big ones? Shoot, what are the big ones?
Amazon Prime's a pretty big one.
I guess that is a big one. Apple, I guess Apple's the other one. Apple iTunes.
I've heard of them.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple others that are there that I think are East Coast, and it's going to be up in Canada as well. So we kind of got that. We got lucky there.
And it's called VUCA, or
it's VUCA. Yeah. The secret to living in the 21st century. And VUCA being it's VUCA. So my daughters run around, and I even do this now, is when we have a horrible moment, we're like, oh, it's just VUCA, right? Because that triggers on our brain. So how do we get through it now? Well, with VUCA, how do we gain vision through this? How do we gain understanding of this situation and clarity? And how do we adapt? Because this right here is, something that we didn't expect.
Right.
And so instead of saying, oh, that's karma, or, oh, that's just,
FUBAR.
FUBAR, or S happens, it's VUCA. It's VUCA, so call it a Christian cuss word, I guess. It's just VUCA. So.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, any parting, we always give the floor to our guests. Anything we maybe didn't cover for, advice, anything like that. I'm going to give the floor to you, Mike. Dustin, I let say a couple words every once in a while. No.
Yeah, no, Dustin and Dave, I would just say that people just need to understand who they are. I mean, that's the biggest piece of advice that I can give them, is do the work to understand who you are. Like, look in that mirror and who do you see? And if you don't know, do the work to find out. And, surround yourself with great people and be willing to listen. And that's what I love about you guys doing. And for those of you who are thinking you should join the Navy, I'd say, yes, I am Mike Schindler. I am a proud U.S. Navy veteran, served the world's greatest Navy. And I didn't fly cool jets, but you can still do some pretty amazing things in there.
But there is a chance you could fly cool.
There's a chance.
You're saying there's a chance.
There's a chance.
You could be on a 50-year-old boat that shakes when you go above 20 knots.
You could be. Oh, Lord. Yeah,
don't worry, it might explode. It's going to be fine.
It's going to be fine. It'll all work out. You won't know it happens.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. And, like I tell my daughters, and they're like, oh, don't you worry about this. Don't you worry about that. I'm like, all I can be is me. And if someone else doesn't like it, that's kind of more their problem than mine. I'm not saying that I go through life as an asshole, but I try not to, but
right.
Every once in a while you got to pull it out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's so true. You guys are great, man. Best of success on your film too.
Hey, thanks so much. Best of luck on yours, man. I'm really excited to watch it.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
And thank you to the audience for still being with us. Go ahead and give us a like, give us a follow, tell your friends, tell your enemies. I don't really care as long as they follow us. You can find us wherever you find your podcasts. In terms of we're on Apple, we're on Spotify. Sorry, we don't have enough FU money in the world to pull ourselves off Spotify. We need the support.
That's great.
On down the list. But thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead and stay on, Mike. We'll do a little wrap up after we leave the audience here, and find my cursor. It disappears. There it is. All right.
Let's pretend like I'm doing it.
All right. Go ahead, Dustin. Let's see your Zoom.
Yeah. Okay.
You gotta get closer to the camera.
Where is it? Oh.
All right. Perfect.
You've been listening to the Know Their Story podcast. If you made it this far, we must be doing something right. Let us know by subscribing to our channel.
And think about sitting down with the veterans in your life, because saying thank you for your service should be the beginning of the conversation, not the end.